love it. Yeah. And he's like, oh, he's actually like, oh. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we had it's got bigger feature.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to do the announcement from here. My name is Liz Stollinger. I am the board president for Central Park United Neighbors. And I just want to send a huge thanks to everybody who is here tonight, both in person and online, to our panelists, our organizers.
You use the microphone.
Hear
me?
No, really.
You want to hold it?
I want to hold it. It is on. It's on.
Hold it closer.
It is. I was
Just get closer.
too close. Okay, we'll do that now.
Yes.
All right, great. So again, Liz Stollinger, I'm the board president for Central Park United Neighbors. I'm just going to do a brief welcome and introduction before we start the panel. So if we can
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So about Central Park United Neighbors, we have this slide with all of this information. But actually, first, I just wanted, with a show of hands, who is attending a Central Park United Neighbors meeting for the first time tonight? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for your interest. Who knows what Central Park United Neighbors is? All right. That's so. We're the registered neighborhood organization for the Central Park community in Denver and the section that's in Aurora as well. And a registered neighborhood organization is, I mean, this kind of event is very much in our wheelhouse. So if you can move to the next slide, I will just our mission. Our mission is the betterment of the city of Denver by providing a forum for the residents living in Central Park to discuss and resolve issues like e-bikes and safety, maybe, a network of communication, a means of acting on matters of importance to the community as a whole. We promote public service, civil civic discourse, collective advocacy, and we are an all-volunteer board of Central Park residents. And so if you can move to the next slide. And so if folks aren't already signed up for our email newsletter, I saw this meeting shared all over Facebook. And folks asking, how do we get information about meetings like this going forward? And so I just want to let you know that we send out a newsletter on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month about what we as a neighborhood organization are doing, what our community partners, what city agencies are doing. It is what we hope is a clearinghouse for accurate information on news and events and policies happening in the city of Denver. So if you're not already signed up, please scan the QR code to sign up for our email list or go to our website, centralparkunitedneighbors.com, and you can sign up for our email list too. So just one more thing, I just want to do a quick agenda overview, which is the next slide. So the bulk of our meetings every month on the month consist of a community hour and a board hour. Our community hour will be taken up by the e-bike and safety panel discussion. We'll actually have a 10-minute break so that we can kind of talk with folks who attended, talk with our panelists afterwards, and then we'll reconvene for our board meeting, which will have, kind of the treasurer's report, emails that we've received. We're actually going to be inducting voting in new members for our board. If anybody's interested in, we'll be talking about that. And then we'll actually have, after that, a discussion, just kind of debriefing among ourselves as a board, but anybody can kind of sit in and join that meeting, talking about what was discussed during the community panel and also any follow-up actions or steps that we as a neighborhood organization can or would like to take next, because it's just kind of a first step. And then we will have a discussion about our committees, and then we'll be planning upcoming community meetings and events. So if anybody is interested in those issues, you're welcome to stay during the board hour as well. And without further ado, I will introduce Amy and Carol, who will best run in the show.
I'd like to do this.
Okay. Right, they will introduce our issue. Just one, I guess, one kind of framing comment I would say is that I think you guys would agree that one of the purposes of this meeting is because we've kind of had this free-floating anxiety around e-bikes and safety in the community over the past few months or longer. And what I think one of the things we wanted to do with this meeting is create a shared vocabulary and a shared set of concepts for both kind of approaching these issues, and then so that we can kind of move forward in a productive dialogue and action. So yeah, without further ado.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Hunter, and I'm Vice President of the Board of Directors, CPUN Board of Directors. I'm co-chair for Safe Streets Committee, and I'm chair of the Education Committee.
Hi, my name is Amy Campbell. I am a co-chair of the Safe Streets Committee with Carol. Thanks for being here.
And you're gonna just
Yes, I. Awesome. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Fine. Good. Okay. I'm going to introduce our panelists who are here with us today. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to do an alphabetical order, left to right. So first we have Mackenzie Hart. If you could raise your hand. Thank you. Mackenzie's the owner and operator of Hart Family Cyclery, which is located in Northwest Aurora. And he's been teaching children and families to ride bikes safely since 2012. Thank you for that. Our next panelist is Kevin Hines. He's a lieutenant with the Denver Police Department. And you can correct me, but I was told that you originally served as a bicycle officer at some point in your police career. So
Originally, but for a number of years, I was out on bike patrol out here, actually in this neighborhood when this was still part of District 2.
excellent.
and he's a cyclist.
And I'm a cyclist.
We also have Dr. Bill Niehaus with us. He's a brain injury board certified professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Our next panelist is Ranger Alex Williams. He's a ranger with the City and County of Denver, and he also is a supervisor for the Trails District, so thank you. And then last but not least, Benedict Wright, and he is the education manager at Bicycle Colorado. And Bicycle Colorado is a nonprofit that advocates for safe and accessible bicycling for all ages through policy, education, and community engagement.
Before we get started, you didn't know you were going to get a bunch of questions thrown at you today, but you are. I'd like you to raise your hand if you ride an e-bike, a bicycle, a motorcycle, or a scooter. Lots. Raise your hand if you drive a car, walk or run on public streets, push a stroller, use a walker or wheelchair in Central Park and other neighborhoods. There you go. There's no hierarchy based on how anyone moves through a community. Everyone has a stake in being safe in Central Park and elsewhere, and when you travel. So we're going to learn tonight some ways to do exactly that. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
All right. Can you advance the slide, please? Okay, so why do we care about this topic of e-bikes and safety? So in addition to the seeing with our own eyes, like in our neighborhood, the more occurrences of people riding e-bikes, this is just some information about kind of more broadly how to think about it. So people adopting e-bikes for recreation and transportation is on the rise. So you can see that almost 1 million e-bikes were sold in the US in 2024. And in Denver specifically, over 10,000 of the e-bike rebate redemptions were used. And statewide, there are another 8,000 rebate redemptions. So definitely some of those 10,000 Denver e-bike rebates were in our neighborhood. And you see those people out riding. But we've also heard from the community a lot of safety concerns for riders of these motorized bikes and also other users of the road. And so kind of broader stats are that there's been a 23% annual increase in e-mobility related injuries. So that's not only bikes, but maybe scooters or other devices that are being battery powered. And there have also been deaths attributed to the actual batteries that are powering these devices. So not just using them, but like what's the battery that's powering them. So these are all things we can think about and why we wanted to put together this forum to like educate ourselves about this topic. So I think that leads us to our first question, which is sort of setting the stage. What is an e-bike and how does it differ from what we're hearing called an e-moto? So that's also a popular thing in this neighborhood in particular. So if you can go to the next slide, and then we'll ask our panelists to comment on this. So we could have maybe Benedict and Mackenzie take the lead on this question if you want to give us some information.
Well, I guess what I would say for what is an e-bike is the state of Colorado has a very specific definition of what an e-bike is. Back in 2017, the state of Colorado adopted into its definition of an e-bike what we sometimes call the three-class system. And I think about 45 other states have also adopted this framework as part of their state's definition. So it's a widely used framework, breaking the legitimate e-bikes into three classes, and then kind of having some differentiation or some norms around who can ride which class and where. There's three classes, as the name of the three classes. Class 1 is pedal assist, so it kind of gives you that little bit of a tailwind electric assist push. Motor doesn't assist you to go past 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is typically throttle assisted, so that hand actuated mechanism, you don't have to be pedaling to move yourself forward. That throttle cuts out at 20 miles an hour on a Class 2 e-bike. And then Class 3 is, again, a pedal assisted e-bike, and that motor ceases at 28 miles an hour. We have an age restriction on the books in Colorado for Class 3s. You need to be 16 to ride a Class 3. We don't have age restrictions for Class 1 and 2. And I think it's worth noting that in Colorado and a lot of other places that use the three-class system, you don't need a license or registration to ride an e-bike. They're regulated like bicycles. You don't need a license to go ride a bicycle. The last thing I'll point to before maybe turning it over to you is that you'll see that the maximum motor power, the maximum power is 750 watts. And that is in state statute. Like in order to be an electric bicycle, it cannot be more powerful than 750 watts. So already any vehicle that is more powerful or has more power than 750 watts is not an e-bike.
I think some of the really important minutia of this is understanding the hard limits of that. The speed limit is a really important part of this. Well, a lot of what we see with throttle bikes in Colorado are bikes that should be limited to 20 miles per hour, but may also have the ability to be called what's a multi-mode bike. A lot of the e-bikes sold direct to consumer and online will be seen as a Class 1, 2, or 3. And you can actually use the controller and the electronics to dictate what you want your bike to be. Do you want your bike to be a Class 1, a Class 2, or a Class 3? You can change the settings to do that. And that's really helpful depending on where you are when you're riding, what you might want to do. But ultimately, it's important to know that that means that's a multi-mode bike. And so that is classified as the highest class at which the bike is capable of being used. So if you have a bike in Class 1 mode, but it can go to Class 3, it's a Class 3 bike. Therefore, it can only be ridden where a Class 3 bike can be ridden, and it cannot be operated by someone underage. Another thing to mention on our Class 3 bike specifically is we do have a helmet law. It's interesting in a state that doesn't have a bike helmet law, although I think we should, or a motorcycle helmet law, although I think we should, and I do own and operate both of those. We do require helmets on Class 3s for those folks riding that are between that 16 and 18-year-old age. It's also important to note that that law also goes to the passenger. So if you are going to have a passenger on a Class 3 bike, that passenger has to be wearing a helmet as well. So this structure has been around a long time. This was set forth officially and nationally by People for Bikes across the country as the recommended statute for all municipalities to hopefully use. That was backed by the National Bicycle Association of Retailers as well. We also stand behind this. And that's been in effect since 2014 nationally as the national recommendation. And a lot of that was actually pulled from Boulder. Boulder, I think, in 2012 was the first person to put some of these laws into their area. So this isn't new. A lot of people come to our shop or we talk to them and like, oh, these new laws, this isn't new. This has been around a long time. It's just really important that we enforce and understand what these differences are in these bikes. Another thing not mentioned on here, but is further back into the law, because it's referred back to our original definition from the 70s in Colorado for what a bicycle is, it has to have pedals. So if you see something with a throttle and no pedals, that's a motorcycle. End of discussion. It does not have pedals and it has a throttle, it is not a bicycle. Cannot go on our paved trails. So that's really important to see because we are seeing more and more of those that folks are calling e-bikes, but are in that e-moto. And we'll be discussing that in some further slides, some more definitions of what an e-moto is. But an e-bike should still present and feel and operate like a bicycle. This class 1, 2, and 3 system is based off of national and international safety standards. This is ISO standards for how far can we have a vehicle of this weight brake in this distance. So how quickly can we bring an e-bike to a stop? We cannot bring e-bikes with more power than 750 watts to a stop within a regulated distance of time and space if it has too much power. So these are regulations based on braking, based on safety, based on trail maintenance for dirt gravel trails from IMBA and other trail makers in our country. So well thought out, well agreed upon in our industry and by lawmakers. But something I think the average consumer doesn't understand or doesn't know because we don't educate enough on it. So hopefully this kind of stuff can help them.
Very briefly, does anybody else on the panel want to add anything? No? Thank you.
Okay, the next slide will kind of get into what Mackenzie was mentioning about, I think we're seeing a lot more e-motos sort of around. And so we wanted to try to provide a definition of what that is. So when you're seeing people out using these types of vehicles, I guess we can call them, you know which one they're using. And when you're complaining about it or talking to your neighbors about it, you're using the right terminology. That's what I would like to see. So maybe you two can also take what is an e-moto and how is it different than an e-bike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like Mackenzie said, while the definition of an e-bike has been around for quite a while, the market of two-wheel electric vehicles has evolved a lot in the period since 2017 when we had that definition. One of those is the emergence of a lot of new two-wheeled electric vehicles that have kind of ridden the e-bike craze. And I've also seen a big shift in the way that people buy bikes. There was a period where, the vast majority of bikes were sold at brick and mortar stores. After COVID, about half of bikes are now being sold direct to consumer, and that includes e-bikes. So we've been seeing a lot of things that might claim to be e-bikes or use e-bike in the advertising because it's kind of all the rage right now, but don't meet that 3-class definition. So what a lot of folks have started using this word e-moto as kind of a nice catch-all term for a lot of these vehicles that have emerged over the last few years that might kind of look like potentially they could be bikes, they might have pedals, they might not, but clearly in some way or another exceed the definition of e-bike, whether that's the top speed that they can achieve with the throttle alone, whether that's they might ship as a class 2 e-bike with a throttle that theoretically stops at 20 miles an hour, but there's a mode that you can switch it to. And then on page 64 of the manual, it says for private roads only that you should use that mode. So there's a lot of kind of vehicles that have emerged that kind of masquerade as e-bikes. And we've been calling these more and more e-motos as kind of a convenient catch-all term for them.
Do you mind if I throw in a perspective on that as well? We in law enforcement get these complaints called into us about people acting recklessly on e-bikes. And if you think about our transportation system as a whole, we've had a lot of switch towards electrification. I'm certain somebody in this room drove here in an electric vehicle tonight. And you know that those electric vehicles are every bit as powerful as any other car or truck on the road. We're seeing the same thing in the bikes. And so we get a lot of calls where people are saying, hey, there's an e-bike. And what we're seeing are e-motorcycles. I mean, some of these are as capable as any other enduro dirt bike out there or full gasoline powered motorcycle. They're intended for that audience, but we're seeing them being used on historically non-motorized trails like bike paths and off highway trails. So I think it's important to draw that distinction because we have a lot of things out there that are being called e-bikes that are really just motorcycles. So they're legitimate motorcycles.
I'd like to know what Dr. Eno sees.
Injuries are coming, right?
I think Carol's kind of curious, like maybe when we get to that slide, or you could speak to it now. Do you see differences between people that come into the hospital when they maybe were riding an e-bike versus an e-moto or motorcycle? Or does the hospital system have that level of granularity for seeing patients? We can circle back to it if you want, but
Well, I'll throw out my just a teaser. If you're on a device that can go faster than you can run, you should wear a helmet. Like, period. The faster that device can go, the worse the injury. This is all bike related, but scooters are just as dangerous, especially when you can utilize them with an app and you don't have a helmet. We see a ton of vehicle related injury, a lot of head injuries, especially I work at Anschutz. It's a cautionary level 1 trauma center. And I can't think of a week we haven't had a brain injury on our unit from some form of action.
I think it's important to note on some of the stats you're going to see tonight, a lot of this is underreported or misreported. So the numbers you're going to see on percentages and number of injuries doesn't always show all of it. Unfortunately, we have a lot of underreported injuries, but I know our hospital systems do not dictate the difference between a scooter, an e-bike, or an e-moto. For battery fires, Denver Fire does not dictate the difference of the start of a fire being from an e-bike battery versus being an electrical fire. It's the same in how they're reported. So we don't have the ability to audit these systems as well to get as granular data as we'd like yet. You're going to see some scary numbers. I think the reality of what we're seeing on our day-to-day is actually a little worse than that. My shop specifically caters to a lot of families, individuals that work at Children's Hospital at Anschutz, but also specifically at Children's. And Children's specifically is seeing nationally an increase of 600% in injuries related to e-mobility items since 2020. So that's 600% of an increase just from Children's talking to their own hospitals. That doesn't include other hospitals as well, but that's among people under 18 that they're reporting that on. So yeah, we don't have that granularity yet in a lot of places, and we need more of that to help to enforce some of these laws so people understand that it is a big deal. Just because your kid convinced you to buy this thing that goes 40 miles an hour, it's a big deal. And if you think they're going to keep it in class 1 mode, they're not.
Can I ask a question?
we're gonna try to get through the slides so if you can hold them for the end.
Okay.
Please. Thank you. So that kind of leads us in maybe to thinking about what are the rules or laws for e-bike riders and also for other road users that are interacting with people riding e-bikes. So if you go to the next slide, Liz, we don't have to read these out. You can just read through them. And some of these points have already been brought up, but if there's a point on here that hasn't been discussed that the panelists would like to discuss, that would be great. And I'd maybe particularly like to hear from our parks ranger about rules related to park use of these e-bikes in parks, because we get a lot of that in our neighborhood because we have a great park system. So
Yeah, I just wanted to note the final bullet points that for the folks can't looking on the screen, there's the panel is kind of blocking it. Final bullet point is local jurisdictions can pass stricter regulations. So I just wanted to make sure that that folks could read this slide. Thank you.
yeah, so I think we've gone through bullet point 1 and 2, and maybe we can talk about 3 with our ranger this year. That'd be great.
Is this for e-motos and e-bikes, or is that different?
This is for e-bikes.
Maybe we should
answer.
jump back a step about e-motos. So an e-moto is a motorcycle. You need a motorcycle license. You need to have taken a class. You need insurance. You need a vehicle that has DOT approved brakes, turn signals, headlights, taillights. So a lot of these vehicles that we're calling e-motors or e-motos, that is illegal. Those are not legally being operated on the street, on the trail, anywhere, unless they're on your private property. So most of what we're seeing as e-bikes in our neighborhood are not bicycles. And that's one of the big issues is how do we figure that out? So this specifically refers to bicycles on this slide.
Yeah, from an enforcement perspective, an e-moto on a trail, we would treat it the same as if you drove your personal vehicle onto the trail. It would be the same type of citation. So yeah, Denver Parks and Recreation, we've seen a huge spike in the use of e-bikes. We love to see it. We also see a huge spike in e-motos and a lack of understanding about the difference. So a lot of what we've been doing recently is education. The most important thing for anybody, whether they're using an e-bike on a trail or an e-moto anywhere in the city, these things can be incredibly dangerous. They're not toys. They go a lot faster, as the doctor said, than you can run. So helmet use is very important. In Parks and Recreation, 15 miles per hour is the speed limit, no matter where you are, whether you're driving on the road with an e-moto where they're allowed or on a trail where they're not allowed. 15 miles per hour is the limit. Park rangers do use LiDAR to do speed enforcement. And our first check when we're seeing someone coming down a trail is, are they speeding? We're not necessarily looking for some of those tells, whether or not that's an e-moto or an e-bike. If they're going over 15 miles per hour, that's a hard speed limit. It's not necessarily flexible in any way, kind of like in a school zone. We'll stop someone for going over 15 miles per hour, provide some education. If it's an egregious violation, it will be met with citation. If they're on an e-moto, there may be police involved because that can be more dangerous than 15 or 20 miles an hour on an e-bike. Denver Parks and Rec enforces Chapter 39 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. It's a very specific chapter, and it doesn't go into a lot of depth on specific e-bike regulations. So we fall back on the speed limit and on safe operation. So even if they are driving speed on an e-bike in Denver Parks and Recreation, if they're operating unsafely, if they're passing recklessly, if they're going too fast for the conditions, say it's rainy or it's icy or it's dark or there are lots of turns, even if they're going under the speed limit, park rangers can pull folks over on any bike, not just e-bikes, but any bike, and issue a citation for reckless operation of that vehicle.
Anyone else want to speak to this or enforcement piece for e-bikes before we move forward?
Go ahead, please.
So I was just gonna say, think of a e-bike as a bicycle. Bicycles are regulated as a vehicle on the road. For the most part, we're expected that bicycles follow the same laws as other motorists. Now, bicycles obviously can use bike lanes. Many people are still not familiar with the idea that we have the safety stop law in place in Colorado. So that essentially allows cyclists under certain conditions to use a stop sign like you would use a yield sign and a red light like you would use a stop sign. So in effect, if you're not taking the right away from somebody else, you can slow down at a stop sign, make sure it's clear, proceed through there. Similarly, at a red light, you can stop. If it's clear, you can go. Same rules apply to the class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes that would apply to a bicycle, and generally otherwise follow the rules of the road, share the road with everybody else. So just to clarify any ambiguity on that.
So
Let's wait. Yeah.
Did you want to add?
Yeah, something new that's on this slide that a lot of people may not be familiar with is the battery regulation, UL certification 2271. That's really important. It is now Colorado law as of August 5th of this year. Of last year, as of August 5th of 2025, no bicycle can be sold in the state of Colorado, either in a brick and mortar or online into the state of Colorado, that does not have a battery tested to the UL 2271 standard. That is the fire safety standard that's been around for about 37 years now. It's not new, but it's really important. And up until this last year was not mandatory in Colorado. We have no national law to regulate this, which is why we are seeing a big introduction of direct-to-consumer brands and online bike sales that don't adhere to this. If you are having issues with battery fires in your neighborhood, you hear from a friend, or you're having an issue on your bike, you can actually file a request for inspection with the Secretary of State for Colorado to talk to that business that sold the bike. Whether they are brick and mortar here or they are from out of state, they do still have to file with the Secretary of State, and we have to go through very serious set of restrictions on what we can and can't sell to be classified as a bicycle shop. So if you're having issues with battery fires, or later as we talk about e-motos and things too, if you suspect that a shop is selling something that's not a bicycle, please report it to the Secretary of State. That's where you want to report that. And somebody who owns a bike shop and they call me all the time, it's great. It's not a hard process if you're doing this legally. It's very easy to work with. So that's a way you have kind of some direct control in your neighborhood.
I also wanted to give us space to talk about when we're driving or when we're interacting with drivers, maybe what we should be doing to watch out for other road users. So again, we don't have to go through all of them, but if this like resonates with any of the panelists and they want to speak to it, please feel free. Yes.
It's not easy when you're in a car to know what type of bike is in the bike lane next to you. There have been a fair number of injuries where a car doesn't expect the bike to go as fast and they're going through the same intersection and then turning into a residential area, a shopping thing, and they see the bike, but they don't recognize that that bike can now go up to 20 miles per hour. And since it's electrically powered, that happens quick. So watch this, that side. We've had a ton of injuries of that scenario. Bike, car at a stoplight, they both proceed. The driver doesn't recheck where that cyclist is. And they were on an e-bike, so that they're going right along with each other and they're in that blind spot. They don't see them. They take out that individual. I think it's also worth mentioning just visibility in general when you're on any type of bike, whether you're on an e-bike or a regular old analog bike that's been around forever. I typically ride about 3,000 miles a year myself. When I go out, you know, my wife jokes around that I look like a road clown. I wear a bright yellow jersey. I'm on a bright red bike. I have a flashing white strobe on the front, a flashing rear strobe, even in broad daylight. And I am absolutely convinced that saved my life a couple of times. A lot of the accidents we'll see is a bike going down the lane and a car turning left in front of them. And there have been a number of times that I think having that front strobe has caught that driver's attention where they might not have seen me otherwise. Because if you think about it, on a bike, you're typically on the far right side of the road where the bike lanes are at, or the outside of the lane of traffic for the most part. It's less visible, the drivers that are coming head on at you. You're over towards the curb. You're not a 4,000-pound vehicle. It's easy to not be seen on a bike. So I recommend you do everything you can to be seen. Obviously, after dark, there are rules about having lights on your bike, but it's not hard to have a light on your bike all the time. And it really, especially those strobing lights, really attract a driver's attention a lot more than just riding along.
I'll just add, as a recreational cyclist, the most important thing you can do as a driver is be predictable. Use your turn signals. There are some new-ish regulations regarding lane splitting, lane filtering. So you may not be able to see that there's a bike or a motorcycle coming up in an area that you wouldn't expect them to be, but they're allowed to be there, passing you at a stoplight. So being predictable, not making a quick turn into another lane without signaling is going to be important to protect that motorcyclist or bicycles.
Okay, maybe we can just take a minute to think about what are some of the benefits of using this new technology. So if you go to the next slide, Liz, these are just some that I stole from some e-bike website. But again, any of them speak to you or there's a benefit that you see interacting with people who these things, maybe we can take a minute or two to speak to that. And then we can also switch to the maybe sides. Thanks. No, done.
Say, I wanted to speak about accessibility for just a moment. My father-in-law had an aortic valve replaced a few years ago, and he lives up in the mountains. He gets out and rides almost every day. Without the e-bike technology, he wouldn't be riding at all, because to get back to his house from any other connecting road involves about a 500-foot vertical climb up the last half a mile. And he's told me, he's like, I can't climb like that anymore. I mean, it's a hard climb for me if I do it, let alone somebody who had an aortic valve replacement. So I think there's a huge benefit in terms of accessibility, getting people out there who might not be able to ride anymore if it wasn't for this technology. And it also helps folks in that kind of condition to be able to get more exercise, to get around better. It's just pure benefit for folks in that position. So
I agree. That's what we see a lot in my shop, and that's something we specialize in. As somebody who partners with some different doctors and Children's Hospital, a few other organizations, we keep people on bikes longer, and that makes a big difference. I know my mother-in-law, she was told she'd never ride a bike again. She now rides a bike, and she goes to 30 events a year with us riding a bike. My mom, same thing. And we had another customer today pick up a bike and go home. And she was told after long COVID and being intubated for 30 days that she would never be able to ride a bike again with strength and other issues. And today she picked up a bike and rode it 15 miles home. That was possible with an e-bike. So I think it's really important to see that accessibility is so important with e-bikes, that it helps us get out and go further and ride more often. And especially in the pedal assist e-bikes that don't have throttles, because we are pedaling still, we're getting moderate exercise, and it's really important. Statistically, we found e-bike riders that are pedal assist are healthier than most acoustic bike riders, because they will ride more often and go further. They'll ride 3, 5, 6 days a week instead of once or twice a month. So they are very important for accessibility, making sure that all of our friends and neighbors can get riding together. And then they're also incredibly important as vehicle replacements. They're incredibly important for accessibility for folks of different economic backgrounds. One of the reasons we've seen such an influx of e-bikes in our community is there's a large number of individuals that cannot afford a car. Our registration fees, as I'm sure you all know, in Colorado are very expensive. Insurance in Colorado is also more expensive than other states. The average Coloradan spends $7,500 a year to own and operate a vehicle if they have no car payment. That's if you own it outright in cash. That is also a small sedan. Not everyone owns a small sedan. So for individuals replacing their car with a bike, but needing to be able to go further or wear a certain type of clothing on their bike and still not be sweaty when they get to work or get there on time, this has become a means of life for individuals. And it's not just recreation, but it's keeping folks alive, it's keeping people outside, and it's helping people feed their families. So something to keep in mind when you see e-bikers out on the road is it's not always just that 8-year-old kid doing wheelies through that 4-way stop. But it's also a mom of 3 trying to get to her second job after dropping the kids off at school. And that has become more and more common in this neighborhood specifically. And we want to continue to enrich people's lives and encourage that behavior while making sure we can maintain safety for everyone in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'll just say something quickly of like what speaks to me. I think the accessibility for older folks, for folks with disabilities, is undeniable. I'm glad we're talking about that. I also think that like the accessibility for youth, I know like youth and e-bikes and e-motos is the source of a lot of consternation amongst a lot of us, myself included. But I also think that there is something worth talking about, that this has kind of emerged in a period where we're also really vexed about youth getting outside, getting out to socialize, things like that. And I do think that e-bikes have kind of a new potential to get kids outside, get kids socializing and riding the way that, maybe we wished they would, or we remember doing when we were younger. And so I think like, we need to be thoughtful in this conversation. Like, we shouldn't, of course, these vehicles that are 5,000 watts and you're riding them without a helmet, like, of course, we should be able to call a spade, and so that's outside of the law. I also think we should be thoughtful about being overly restrictive, potentially on vehicles that aren't the source of the problem. So I think there's like a genuine kind of good faith kind of conversation and, process to be had here, kind of in that youth mobility, safety dynamic.
Liz, I'm gonna skip this drawback slide and go to the next one. And the next one after that, because I want to get to sort of the e-bikes and injuries and get the sense from a physician on the panel, like what you're seeing and how we can think about it, especially maybe as parents deciding what vehicles to get for our kids.
I'll speak traumatic brain injury, big picture. There's about 200,000 hospitalizations for traumatic brain injury each year in the US.
Stop.
All the traumatic brain injuries out there. As a brain injury doctor, I include concussion as a brain injury. It's a mild brain injury from my perspective. They're all brain injuries. If you try to distill that down into an easy understood unit of people, if you take everyone enrolled at Northfield High School, a little bit over 2,000 individuals. So when my kids go to Northfield, there will be, based on the stats, 5 students that get hospitalized for a traumatic injury over there. Each one's 4 years. 1 to 2 of those might not make it out of the hospital. If you look at a class that's around 350-ish students, 40 of those students will have a non-athletic brain injury, probably a concussion of some sort. I can't tell you stats that's from a bike or anything else or an assault or anything. I can just tell you about 40 of each class each year will have some form of brain injury. I don't know, like, think about all the things you can do as a human, and a lot of that is because of your cognition and your ability to think and plan and do stuff. You want to protect that brain organ. And it's not just kids. The thing that irritates me beyond no end is when the whole family's riding on their bikes, which is great. All the kids have helmets, but the parents don't. I don't know, it feels like they're saying their brains don't matter, but their brains do matter, because without their brains, it's going to be really hard to care for those kids, even if it's a concussion for that week that they have to deal with symptoms. So, keep your brain safe. If you're on a thing that can move faster than you can run, even if it's not a bike, rollerblades, scooter, right? You don't want to see me as your doctor. Because you are.
Get the right helmet for the right vehicle. And I sell a very different helmet for a kid on a balance bike this tall than I do for someone of my weight and size moving on an e-bike. And there are e-bike rated helmets. We have different levels of concussion protection. So please always wear a helmet, but make sure you have an appropriate helmet. The number of adults and children I see in our neighborhood here riding e-moto 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour down the street wearing a Walmart DOT certified helmet that we wrote the laws for in 1962 is terrifying. So make sure you have the right helmet. If you're going to be on an e-bike, get an e-bike helmet. If you're going to do something like a scooter, get a full face helmet. Make sure you actually buckle. All those little things. Make sure it's fitted properly. Have the person selling it to you give you a free helmet fit. Anyone on this planet that sells you a helmet would happily teach you how to wear it as well. So make sure you know how to wear your helmet as well.
Thank you. Okay, I think our next slide. Maybe in the interest of time, and Ms. Carol, I was gonna. Okay, do you want to just mingle?
Do you want to go or do you want to throw some questions out?
Okay, we'll do a few minutes of questions and then we'll have some mingle time. I don't know how you want to choose.
We just want to make sure there are questions and not comments. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Most of us learned to drive. Somebody taught us the rules of the road. Our kids who come into your shop or wherever taught the rules of the road. Because where I live in the Over Park section of this area, there are no speed limit signs on the road for the drivers. B, kids, we have no bike lanes or anything like that. Kids are all over the place. And, I just wonder, somebody teach them the rules of the road.
Short answer is no.
Okay, why not?
Safe Routes to School no longer has funding in our state, hasn't for a long time, enough to do programs like that. And our bike nonprofits are getting smaller and smaller by the hour and are no longer receiving state funding for those programs either. So we're not seeing that. We don't teach that in the schools anymore. A lot of the bike shops are picking up some of that. We're trying to do a little more of that. It depends on the shop. We'll talk to you a lot about rules of the road in my shop, but we also will never sell anyone under 18 an e-bike in my shop. So that's tricky. So we do talk about it, but not everyone wants to stand there long enough to listen if they're not going to be allowed to buy something from you. But no, we do not have enough programs in our community to teach that at all. Most kids have no idea what is our experience.
I'll give a slightly different answer to that. I want to say that Safe Routes to School is still funded to an extent. I think it's underfunded. I think we could fund it more.
That's true.
But
Comparatively, I would say. Yeah.
yes, certainly. So there is a certain amount of state funding that goes towards kind of classroom education. It's very dispersed across the state. There's nothing uniform. Not every single second grader is getting rules of the road on bikes. I wish they were. Some of them are lucky enough to have a local shop like Mackenzie's or a local nonprofit or a city that's really invested in Safe Routes to School. So I think it's a little bit all over the place, but I think the short answer is no. And I think that, by design, or at least the way we've done things in Colorado for a very long time, is like to ride a bicycle on the road or down the cul-de-sac. We don't require education or registration. And I think now the conversation with e-bikes and e-motos is like, where is that line? I think there's a reason why it's more powerful than 750 watts. You need to have a license in order to operate that because it goes fast enough. The risks are great enough. So that conversation around, well, who is responsible for providing education? Is the state? Should the state be doing it? Or should it be the community? Should it be caregivers? I think historically we've deferred to the community and caregivers rather than the state when it comes to kind of low speed vehicles like, razor scooters and bicycles. And
Before we move on, Lieutenant Hines, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I actually would like to add to that. So again, there isn't compulsory education like there is with driver's ed, obviously with bikes. However, I think that, from our perspective as a department, we're always trying to gain compliance with the law. We don't necessarily just going out there to write the tickets. We'd like to educate folks. I think our friend with the Rangers would probably agree. We're trying to get people in compliance with the expectations. So wherever possible, we do provide that education to people when we contact them about, how to ride more safely and do things of that nature. I think it's important when we have these community conversations to mention that it kind of falls on all of us to make sure that, in particular, our children know the rules of the road and the expectations. I don't know very many 10-year-olds who are going to go out and buy themselves an e-bike. That usually involves a parent. And if you're a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver who's going out and buying a bike for a kid, it's really important to have those conversations because although we do limit the class of e-bikes to 750 watts, I think that's a number that needs a little bit of perspective too, because that is a continuous output of power that's more powerful than any of us could provide in on our own. I mean, pro cyclists are often putting out around 450 watts if they're top tier riders. So we are talking about a bike that can be pretty powerful in the hands of a kid who's not necessarily, figured it all out yet, but thinks they have. So make sure that if, you know, a child under your care is getting access to an e-bike or even just a bicycle, that they understand the rules. If they need some help with that, reach out to us. I bet anybody up here would be happy to help with that education, and we'd rather do that than skin accidents.
All right, remember, we're asking for questions, not comments. Yes, sir.
Follow up on that. What are the rules of the road when I see bike lanes, but what about when I'm on Beeler Street? Are the kids on e-bikes, let's say, since that's what we're talking about, allowed on the sidewalks and the roads?
Question. Question.
You know, it kind of depends on the roadway, and we have maps out there that'll show where bike lanes are on sidewalks. Like an example is down in the Cherry Creek area. I know there's one part of the Cherry Creek trail that's actually sidewalk. Bikes are allowed on that area. Generally, bikes, you know, small children will be on sidewalks. Let's just exempt them right now. I mean,
We're talking about e-bikes right now.
5-year-olds to ride in lanes of traffic. But
We'll get the e-motos later, I guess, but just for e-bikes, are they allowed on the sidewalk, say on Beeler Street?
If there's a white bike lane.
They're allowed on sidewalks for 1 block, unless you're 12 years or younger.
For 1 block?
1 block, anyone can ride a bicycle. An e-bike is considered a bicycle. 1 block on a sidewalk. The intention is to go from your front door down your sidewalk and get to the street.
think of it like a runway. You know, you're
All right. So
then you
basically, to
like-
travel
yeah.
from their house to school, they shouldn't be on the sidewalk.
Correct. And
They
it's
should
an
be on the
important thing
street.
to teach our kids too, because sidewalks actually are statistically one of the more unsafe places to ride, especially in Colorado or the Denver area with our alleyways and our uneven sidewalks. So the street would be safer. But yes, we should not have people riding distance on a sidewalk of any means.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to have a few minutes to mingle, so you'll be able to speak to the panel. Yes, sir.
Let me just, before you go, any questions that are in the chat or in the Google form that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you. So if you have your contact information in there, we will be able to give the answer to your question to you.
Thank you.
I have a few that are in the chat. I answered them, so you can check.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. This is about e-motos. So what as someone walking along the path on a multi-use things, I see this e-motos going screaming by or doing a wheelie or riding on the grass everywhere. Is there anything I should, as a regular citizen, do to help the situation? Yeah, so what we recommend is you call 311 or police non-emergency. If you call police non-emergency and it's in a park, they'll generally direct it to us. We have rangers on duty 24/7, and we will respond to address that issue. Can't promise that they'll stop and speak with us and take the citation we're going to give them, but we will be there, and that's generally a deterrent for that activity.
Thank you. Grab yourselves a snack or talk to our panelists for about, we'll take about a 10.
Thanks, everybody.
Anybody have any other questions?